Welcome to video number 3 of local projection methods in Stata.
If you're passionate about understanding data and the economy, you are in the right place. Before we start with today's tutorial, I would like to invite you to hit that subscribe button. It's free and it really helps the channel grow and reach more people like you.
In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how we can extract the monetary policy shock from a vector autoregressive model. Remember that we have estimated the VAR model in video number 2, so if you haven't watched that video yet, I would recommend that you watch it first. At this point, you may be wondering, why do we need to extract the monetary policy shock from the vector autoregressive model? So the local projection package assumes that the shock variable provided is exogenous. You can find this information in the paper of the developer Ugarte Ruiz, who in page number 2 puts, the local projection relies on the assumption that the shock of interest is exogenous, has been previously identified, or that a set of instruments is available. If we were to pass a raw endogenous variable, for example, the federal fund rate as the shock, the estimated impulse response functions will be biased by reverse causality. What's going to be our approach? We're going to feed the Koleski orthogonalized shock from step number 2 into our local projection. This is going to satisfy the exogeneity requirement without using instrumental variables. There's other alternatives to using a shock previously identified from a vector autoregressive model, such as implementing narrative shocks as those by Romer and Romer in 2004. I strongly recommend that you read this paper because it's going to show you how you can identify monetary policy shocks. Other choices are high frequency identification or maybe implementing an instrumental variable using the following commands available in the local projection package. It's very important to highlight that we are replicating Shorda 2005 paper, so we are not going to be digging deeper into these alternatives. However, if you are interested in learning how to estimate narrative shocks or identify a monetary policy shock with high frequency identification, I would suggest that you let me know in the comments so I can keep it in my list for coming videos. Let's quickly review how we are going to extract the monetary policy shock from the VAR model. The Koleski identification implies that the variables ordered before the federal fund rate do not respond contemporaneously to the monetary policy shock. What's going to be the procedure that we're going to use in Stata? We're first going to estimate the vector autoregressive model, and we're going to collect the reduced form residuals of the federal fund equation. Then this residual is going to contain the structural shock plus the contemporaneous influence of the following variables. Remember that EM stands for the log of non-farm payroll employment, P stands for the PCE deflator, and PCOM stands for the smooth change in commodity prices. What we are going to do is we're going to purge the influence by regressing the residuals of the federal fund rate equation on the residuals obtained from the equations that correspond to the log of non-farm payroll employment, the price deflator, and the commodity prices. This is the regression that we are going to be estimating in Stata, and the idea is that the monetary policy shock is the portion that is the residual that we get from the regression of the federal fund rate on the other residuals. So the residual, that is epsilon, of the federal fund rates that is obtained from estimating this regression is the structural monetary policy shock. Finally, we are going to normalize to unit standard deviation for comparability. So let's go into Stata, and I'm going to show you how to follow these steps. In Stata, we're going to start by importing the dataset again. We have to t-set the time variable, and I'm going to estimate again the vector autoregressive model using the quietly command at the beginning so we don't get all the output again in Stata. So let's run this do section. Now that we have the vector autoregressive model, we need to extract the residuals of the different equations. In order to do that, let's begin by showing you how to obtain the residuals of the federal fund rates. So we're going to use the command predict. I'm going to assign a name to our variable. In this particular case, it's residuals underscore federal fund rates. And the command is residuals, and we need to specify which equation. In this particular case, it's the equation for the federal funds, which is FF. Next, we're going to do the same for the other equations that are located before the federal fund rates. Now we need to estimate the linear regression to purge the federal fund residual of contemporaneous effect of the other variables in the system. So I'm going to use quietly regress, and now I'm going to have as dependent variable the residuals of the federal fund rate, which we have extracted here, and I'm going to be regressing this on the rest of the residuals in the model. Finally, to obtain the federal fund rate shock, I'm going to use the command predict. We're going to call this federal fund shock, and it's going to be basically the residuals from this regression. Now I'm going to show you how you can normalize to one standard deviation the shock. We're going to first summarize the federal fund rate shock so we can obtain the standard deviations. Next, we're going to replace the federal fund rate shock by the following. It's going to be the shock divided by the deviation. Finally, I'm adding a label to this variable, and I'm saying that this variable corresponds to a structural federal fund rate shock using a one standard deviation normalization. The last step is to plot the series. I'm going to use the two-way command to plot the federal fund rates along with the time series variable. I'm going to select the whole script, and we are going to execute this portion of the do file. In the screen, you can see the structural fund rate shock. We're going to be using this shock in the local projection model that we're going to estimate in the next tutorial. I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel so you can get a notification anytime I submit new content. Please give a like to the video, and I would appreciate if you leave a comment and let me know your thoughts and feedback. I'm going to see you in the last video where we are going to be estimating the local projection